Fight back. Fight back.
Welcome in all you, well, hold on. It's officially Stormtroopers. We'll get in that in a second. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. With me, BP, the Storm Surge podcast in full effect. First landfall made, and the Aviators were downed. We'll get into that plenty. But first of all, huge news. Listen, the impact is being felt by the Storm here in Orlando. There is actually a new movement, BP, a new bit of advertisement I've heard about taking place. Buc-ee's is getting involved, and the rumor is that the I-4 eyesore will now become the world's largest Buc-ee's.
Man, a multi-story Buc-ee's. Who would have thought it? I mean, how many times in one building can you hear fresh brisket on the board? That was the best April Fool's joke I had ever seen was Buc-ee's. And yeah, that was phenomenal. Going around town. What's up, everybody? I'm so glad to be with everybody again. Hey man, it's dub time. We got a dub last week. How long has it been since a professional team in Orlando, outdoors anyway, got a dub at home? Doesn't that feel nice? I'm so happy for those guys, man. They played their butts off. I'm really impressed with Anthony Becht and what he's done with the team this week. We got some discussions about going ahead into Louisville this week later on. We'll recap last week's game. But dude, it's so nice to be on the winning end of a football game in Orlando. I'm so thrilled. And Jack Plummer, 1,000 IQ plays.
Oh, great.
Chris Rowland. Okay. Am I saying his name right? I hope I am. Chris Rowland.
Yeah, you're doing it.
I just got to get those names down, and because these guys are going to be household names before long, so get used to it. But barring the little tap on the back, and I watched that play back too, and I'm like, man, that's just got to kill you, dude. Your guy is so far out in front, and he scores 84 yards, and you just get a little and call it back. But redemption. Will he be buying the steak? Absolutely. He might even have to throw in a couple of shrimp on top of that too, just for good measure. But no, it was a really
full shrimp, maybe just some mushrooms. I think
something. You can't just have a piece of beef on this one. You got to have a little extra this time around. But anyway, great game from the Storm. Great fans. Shout out to the Stormtroopers. Hold on a second. We got to shout out the Stormtroopers here.
Oh Lord.
Call them what? That's what I'm calling them.
Well,
I mean, it could be Spaceballs, but
well, yeah, no, but see, here's the thing. This has come ordained from a member of the Orlando Storm themselves. For those that didn't see it yet on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, get a hold of your life, like, subscribe, do the thing, notifications, yada yada. So you can see stuff like this with me talking not only with Sam Jackson but also Cole Schneider as they delivered the first pitch in the final bit of the hype tour before that first landfall. I asked them specifically, BP, after the conversation we had last week about Storm Watchers or Storm Troopers. This was what Sam, Jack, and Cole had to say about it.
Are fans Storm Watchers or Storm Troopers? Which is better? It's this or that scenario?
I like Storm Troopers personally. I'm a Star Wars fan, so that's the name.
Can't go wrong with the Star Wars angle. Cole.
I also second that.
Okay.
Second that. Whatever Sam says goes.
Let's see.
His word is law.
As you heard Cole say, his word is law, even though he seemed to agree in lockstep. Center Cole Schneider, which, by the way, I'm still getting used to him snapping the football as the starting guy. And you know what? I'm good with it. He did it at UCF for a bit. He's doing it now here for the Storm. And Jack Plummer actually gave him props on a number of the plays we talked about, the 1,000 IQ. Cole snaps at the ball for a guy jumping off sides. Jake Plummer taking the opportunity to take the shot. And listen, I'm not throwing shade at anybody who thought, oh, well, the Aviators had 2 defensive touchdowns taken back. No, he didn't. They committed 2 penalties. 1,000 IQ, as you've been putting it, PP, was taken advantage of. And Jack Plummer has shown us that in his resolve, he also is looking for that opportunity to roll the dice and be aggressive, as you'd like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we questioned him about that in post-game press. And again, this week he had some media availability. And I kind of asked him what he was, what's going through his head when that happens. Like, how much of that is practice? Like, how much of that is just quarterback discipline and, awareness, and how much of it is improvisation? And he kind of gave it a 50-50. He said the discipline plays, the interceptions that were called back because of penalties, he saw that. We did see him at least one of the 2 incidents. He pointed and he said, hey, that guy right there. So he saw it. And that was intelligent on his part. Secondly, the Mahomesian flip is what that I'm just going to be called. You can laugh all you want. I know where you're laughing. He's all right, Homer. But
Homer.
That's a totally different show. See us at the Student of the Game podcast in August. Anyway, we saw that improv that, hey, there's a guy flip, we need a first down. And that was solid. I want the fans to understand that as disappointed as you might be that DTR is not on the field, DTR is present and accounted for. Our vantage point on this is, DTR might not have gotten the nod at quarterback 1, but he is in Jack Plummer's ears. He is coaching him up. He's motivating him. He's supporting him. He's doing exactly what a good backup quarterback will do. And I'm certain there'll be situations down the line where he'll be involved in the offense. I'm not saying this guy's never going to see a snap. So for everybody that's disappointed that DTR is not on the field right now, just hang with us. His time to shine will come. But Plummer right now is the guy. He played pretty well. He did get sacked 4 times, but that's, again, first week adjustments. You got to get a game under your belt. They only have that short period of training camp. So these guys really, for only having a month to gel, they look pretty good. So now they've got a game under their belts. They'll have another semi-full week of practice. They're playing on Saturday this week. So we'll see what happens with the offensive line. But all in all, they did really good. They kept Plummer relatively clean. He eventually took advantage of some rush lanes, found the holes, great slide to get a first down, move the sticks. So all in all, he's got it for right now. DTR will have his role at some point, and we hope to see it. Also want to shout out the defense. We talked about it this week with Coach Beck, and he talked about it at the end of the game on Sunday night. Bend, don't break defense. They got to get out of the red zone this week. They really need to make some stops. I mean, getting the stops, they were 1 for 5 in the red zone was Columbus. So they really need to make those stops ahead of the red zone. And like he said, don't want them to get tired. If the defense wants to get off the field and stay fresh, they need to stop them a little sooner. But, that's exactly what you do. You take what the offense gives you, keep the ball in front of you, keep them out of the goal line. They put 3 field goals on the board and before they scored their first touchdown in the second half. So that's fantastic defense for a first week in a short window. Looking ahead to Louisville, and we'll have a better breakdown later on in the show today. Louisville played Birmingham pretty tight, but one thing that the Kings ended up being was very one-dimensional. They only ran for 46 yards total across all rushers. So the Storm have a really good opportunity to play lockdown defense this week. And they did do a good job against Columbus with the interior rush game early, which is why the Aviators were not very successful. And Jalen McClendon had to do a little bit more in the air than expected, so they weren't very balanced. But, paint the picture really well. The Storm did a good job. Shout out Michael Lance, dude, 55 yards. What a weapon that's going to be. Back him up 5, see if he can score that 4th point, which did happen last week in DC. We had our first 4-point field goal. That was a sight to see. So the long field goals are going to be a thing, I'm sure. But Lance coming in clutch. They did what Kyle expected them to do from the get-go is take the points. Take the points. Both head coach Ted Ginn Jr. and Anthony Becht alluded to that. Coach Ginn said that in his post-game availability. He was regretting not taking the points when he needed to. Yeah. They had a couple of, stonewall drives. I mean, excellent defense inside the 5 by the Storm. Swat it, send it back. Great penetration into the backfield, returning the passes to Sender. Just an excellent job. And we want to shout out that back wall that I'm calling them the eye wall. Okay, somebody might have another name for that, but if you know anything about hurricanes living in Florida, the eye wall is the most intense part of a storm. It's the loudest, it's the noisiest, it's the stuff that wrecks people and wrecks houses and stuff. So we want that back wall to be so loud, so obnoxious, clad in orange, making all the noise. UFL owner Michael Pohl said that it sounded like there were 20,000 people back there, and there weren't as many. So you could throw all those fans back into that corner right there, and Inter & Co. will be a hot mess to play, especially in that end zone over there. So I'm super happy that the fans came out. A little over 11,000 came out. And, it was, they were scattered, a little bit more spread out than I figured than they would be, but they were loud, they were engaged, they had a good time, and the whole experience was great. And I know, Kyle, you and I talked about this too. What a great first outing for the Storm, from fans to the cheerleaders to Kratos, the mascot. I mean, DJ Khaled at the halftime. I mean, it was so much fun being there.
No, absolutely. I had a great time, and the football was good, not just because the Storm won. It was a good football game in general. And listen, shouts to Ted Ginn Jr. The Aviators are a good football team. I think they're going to certainly, at the very least, win some games. They could have just as easily won, I feel like, against the Storm on Sunday night, as the Kings had the shot at the Stallions of Birmingham there, that are a fantastic group within the UFL. One thing I wanted to mention alongside of the 1,000 IQ that Jack Plummer showed at quarterback was the poise to keep this group going after the called back touchdown. But I did have a moment with Chris Rowland and Elijah Badger after the game that I thought was particularly entertaining here. Here we go. Big touchdown. It got called back. You scored anyway. How much trash was talked between you two about trading that touchdown?
It was no trash talking. All love. I mean, we got the game. We won the game at the end of the day. I showed him love when he got his touchdown.
Yeah. There was immediately, I was surprised. I thought he was going to come and be like, dang, why'd you do that? But he was first thing, Elijah's a pro. He responded, he said, hey, we're good. We're gonna finish this drive. It's all right. Let it go. So once he said that, I felt a little better, but fittingly, it had to be me that scored, which I wasn't, too happy about it. I'd rather it have been anyone else, but I'm glad we were able to finish that drive, and we handled it well. I owe him a steak dinner, so that's what I told him.
BP, the main reason I even bring that up is because the way there was enough mistakes made that this is one of those where they won, but there's still going to be plenty to coach, right? If you can learn lessons in a win, what a great thing to do there. It just the fact that had the opportunities to build this chemistry. What we saw right there, God bless Chris Rowland. I'm going to work to get him on this show. That head drop when I asked that question. Here we go.
That was classic. It was that head dip of shame, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I know. Oh, shucks.
All is well. I think he knows I wouldn't have asked that question if they didn't score it back. I'll put it that way. But
absolutely.
I think that's so much of a build from that point to take us into how I feel like they were going to, how important it is that they're going to build against the Louisville Kings. And actually, BP, to your credit, you asked Coach about challenging Jason Bean and the Louisville Kings, and here's what he had to say.
Live arm, he can run. He'll drop some balls, man. You're like, wow, that's a dude right there. And then there's some mistakes that you see that as a young quarterback he's working through. So we gotta lean on the high side of his good things that he does and make sure we can take those things away. They got Lucky Jackson, who's a dude. I'm really impressed by him. And again, their running game wasn't great, but I would assume that that's been a point of emphasis all week, and we'll be ready for it. So, again, I don't think our defense played its best, but you're right. Bend don't break. If we're going to get down to the red zone, they were 1 for 5 in the red zone. I'll take that all day. But, if they don't want tired legs and they want, to be a little fresher in the game, they need to get off the field before they get on the red zone. So that's on those guys to execute better. And we have to do that this week.
This is what I love about what's happening going into this game, BP. Yeah, sure, they won the football game, but as I mentioned, let's be honest, and credit to Ted King Jr., Aviators head coach, who had said the whole reason for that early fumble that set up Jashaun Corbin and the franchise's first score in its history was not being hit to that point in punt return. I'm not making excuses, but it's a factor. They took advantage and ran with it, right? But
yeah,
with all that going on, coach still calling for more. Is this the Beck effect in full effect?
I think it is. He's not playing around when he says, more, masi mas, move your ass. He's absolutely, I figured he'd like that. He's absolutely dialing up the intensity, and he's not going to let these guys rest on their laurels, which is good, and that's what a good coach will do. Learning in a win is just as important as learning from a loss.
Correct.
And I absolutely think that this is going to be a little bit of a defensive adjustment. And, because Jalen McClendon, to his credit, is very similar to Jason Bean in their play style. They're that spread offense, mobile quarterback. Bean can roll out of the pocket too. Bean actually did most of the rushing for Louisville last week in the loss.
I was going to say, that's the vibe I had, that Bean is a slightly better athlete than McClendon. Not saying McClendon's unathletic. I feel like Bean has a little bit more pop to his step, and it showed in that contest against the Stallions.
Yeah, he sure does. So it's going to be something where the Storm defense, especially the front seven, are going to have to be a little bit more wary. It's probably going to be a scenario where, even if you line up in cover 2, you're going to have a spy. You could be in cover anything at this point. You're going to have somebody with eyes on Bean. And because not only can he break away from pressure and run upfield with some great strides, he can spin the ball. Louisville had a case of the dropsies in that game against Birmingham. So, and I'm going back and watching that game again, I felt like Louisville should have beat Birmingham big time. It was just a case of Bean throwing dimes and not making it into the parking meter. I mean, just everything just bouncing off of shoulders inexplicably. They had a very long touchdown pass that was right in the breadbasket and just dropped, like slipped right between the guy's hands. Like, I just don't understand how you can't help your guy out on that one, because he threw you a gorgeous ball. So you can't argue with Jason Bean's ability in that first game. He really showed out, and there's more to come. And I expect Louisville to make those adjustments and put out a bit better performance. So the Storm are really going to have to step up. But here's the spoiler alert on this one, class. We have to play these guys 2 weeks in a row.
Right.
Once at home and once on the road. And we don't have to face them again unless we meet in the postseason. But we're going to get 2 consecutive shots at these guys. So whatever you don't get or whatever you leave on the field at home, you got to turn around and go on the road for the first time as a unit and do that same thing again. So, I think test 1 for Orlando is not to just get a feel for things. Go after this guy. Put the pressure on him. Make him roll out of the pocket, because when he got uncomfortable, he was not very good. He started making those mistakes, and overthrows were common with him. So, and then just keep that pressure on. And then what you learned from that first game, apply in the second game and do something different. Don't be the same team that he sees 2 times in a row. You're going to have to change it up a little bit too. On the other side of that, Birmingham wasn't a bad team. And A.J. McCarron coached his butt off in his debut. So, I expect Louisville to have learned a lot from that too, because they weren't playing a slouch team either. So it's going to be interesting to see how they prepare for this and how they execute, especially with the win under their belt. And Louisville coming off a loss. Coach Beck said that too. They're a little hungrier because they lost their home opener, and that stings. So we'll see what they do.
I would even ask from this effect. So you got the whole Becht effect thing. You got me fully infected with this concept here, BP. The coaching contest here, I think, is going to be what's most crucial, especially for the second of the 2 games. Which, if things go according to plan, we will have the voice of the Storm here on deck, Jeff Sharon, to talk to us about what he thinks will happen in that game. But with all of that being said, BP, I think the coaching matchup here is what's going to be crucial. And I'm taking nothing from Chris Redmond, but if I'm a coach of a UFL team and I'm looking across the thing and I see the Becht in effect, That's a tough draw. I'm not gonna lie. So this will be a fascinating opportunity to see if the Storm can take that advantage of the Beck effect to try to at least get one, if not both of these games, which would give them a huge leg up on their side of the league.
For sure. I honestly think too that Orlando's got to step up some more in the run game. And Jayshawn Corbin, I mean, you put the guy in a short field, of course he's going to score the touchdown. You ain't got to worry about that. But I think a little bit more consistent running from he and Elijah Dotson. You know, I mean, you look at it. I mean, Corbin ran for 68, Dotson ran for 37. Chris Rowland, by the way, with a sweep that he ran for 28 yards. So, you know, Rowland in open field is something to behold too. He's got some wheels on him. So, you know, I could see them doing those sweep runs out of jet, you know, to mix things up a little bit. But, you know, Jayshawn Corbin is your typical kind of college spread offense type runner. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he's got some power to him, showed a little bit of shiftiness in that first touchdown run, shed a tackle or two. So, you know, he's not going to be a guy that gets, you know, 3-4 yards in a cloud of dust and breaks 70. He's probably going to be more of your consistent 6, 7, 8 yards a carry. So they need to lean on him a little bit more and keep the pressure off of Plummer to make sure that he can sit in the pocket and get the passes. You know, Plummer is got that little bit of mobility, but he does have a little bit more of the drop back mentality. So, yeah, I think if you keep his pocket clean, he'll make the reads. He had a couple of really good over the middle throws too. I saw, Absolutely. You know, a couple on the slants and the crossers. So
quick strikes, you know, for Yak that were significant gains. Absolutely.
Well, when you've got speed and Elijah Badger and Rowland coming out of the slot too, right. You know, you've got that capability to hit those guys on quick hits and let them do the work. But, you know, it's that old school traditional offensive run to set up pass. Something that we've all seen in the UFL is that there is still a lot of college in these guys' performance. Listen to me. You know, their performance is still lingering from the college days. You know, they still have, you know, it's a passing league, but not to the degree that the NFL is. It's more of that spread and run, you know, scenario. So, and balance is important. You know, you can look at both offenses last week too, even though Columbus managed to, you know, do their fair share of running too. I mean, Zaquandre White only ran for 48 yards, you know, so they're not really churning out the runs in this one. It's, you know, more of a spread offense passing league. So if you can get that balance and you can slow those defenses down, get the safeties to cheat up a little bit, and then you got a guy like Plummer who can throw the deep ball. We did see 1 or 2 of those attempts. You know, I think it'll be better for them because, you know, Louisville can do the same thing. And they can score in chunk plays. We don't want them to score in chunk plays because, you know, like I said, Bean has a couple of those receivers catch those balls. They're walking out of there with a win, and they probably could have put, you know, a good 14-point lead on Birmingham in that one, which is something to be said.
You know, everything you say is accurate, but there's a couple of other things I think that add nuance too. For one, I believe the Aviators might have had a little bit of lemon booty early on when they were trying to go with Jayshawn Corbin early. There were even a couple of openings that Jake Plummer had missed early. And again, we talked about this too, you know, post game here on the Storm Surge, where there was an element where both sides of the ball for the Storm got better consistently throughout the game. And the Aviators did the same on offense. But what I think happened to an extent was a little bit of, shall we say, worry in Jayshawn Corbin. Hey, they brought out a guy who wasn't the starter officially and then was named Friday week 1 as the guy. We were expecting JDR. Well, let's see if this cat can beat us over the top. He's already missed some throws. What had happened was, oh, great, the guy got called back. Wait, he did what off of his back foot after keeping things right with his poise? I don't think they thought Jack Plummer was going to beat him like that. See, I'm still thinking of the snake from the Cardinal days, man.
Aren't we?
Yeah, right.
We've all done it.
Listen, it was my turn. But Jack Plummer doing the thing the way he did, I felt like that defense, that the Aviators defense thought they had more of a beat on him and was kind of at a point in the game daring him to throw that knockout punch. And eventually he did. That's what I saw.
Yeah, I agree with that. And more of that in the salvo, set it up and get that done. Cause we saw him spin it, he's got an arm on him. It's not, He's not just throwing over the middle all the time just for the dinks and dunks. He can hurl it downfield. And I see Orlando being an offense eventually that can get those chunk plays.
Yeah.
I don't see them constantly being a dink and dunk offense. I think they can really get it downfield and next time, maybe off the back foot, try to open the hips a little bit more and get it to your tight end instead of throwing it clear over his head. Little stuff like that.
That point.
Yeah.
That play was a bit of a crime too. I agree.
Right. But, those are all things that I'm sure Coach Beck has been adjusting this week, and the little details, it's different at game speed. And he said this too in post game, they don't get to hit each other in practice because they're not really going to kill each other. So you've got to get at game speed. You got to get at game mentality to understand what you're capable of and how to make adjustments from there. Now that they've got that, they'll go back to work and they'll fix those little details. And it's honestly, I'm excited to see what they do in week 2 coming off a win. And I'm excited to see what Plummer does with, the knowledge that he gained from the previous week. And I expect a better performance from him, than he did last week, and maybe hit those passes a little more.
Yeah.
And,
what we mentioned 1,000 IQ, there's nobody that knows what happened as well as he does, I think, too,
right.
that's an element of it.
Yeah, I agree. So, overall, if I'm grading this week's game, I'm grading it a B+. I was
too.
I was very impressed with what I saw, and it defensively got my attention immediately when they held Columbus to those 3 field goals. That's cash money, dude. Mm-hmm. You can't argue with a solid defense that's given up field goals. And 1 for 5 in the red zone. I lost track of how many sacks they got. Let me pull up the stat sheet. They did sack McClendon 3 times. Yeah.
Right.
So, they're getting home. They had some real good outside pressure too. The edge rushers were getting around, 1 or 2 all out blitzes, some linebackers busting through, making McClendon move. So, I was really happy. And then defense wins championships in any league, but defense in the UFL is a big deal because, you can say what you will about the quality of play. I think we really got a good showing across all of the games, actually. This wasn't just our game in particular. I think week 1 was a really good setup for what happens this week now that the jitters are out. And, it's going to be interesting to see, what the fans think at this point. And I know Coach Beck is a fantastic ambassador for this league, and he's done a really good job of getting people's attention. We're happy to help him in the chorus. And I asked him, to give a plug to the Jaguars fans, because now Orlando, you're going to have the Jacksonville Jaguars as a guest team in 2027. So just think about it for a minute. Okay. Let me get on my soapbox for a second here. Let me give you my plea. All right. So, and for all you fans that know Kyle from the Duval Dive, this may end up on his show at some point. So Travis, I humbly apologize in advance here. But, I come down from ye old shores of the St. John's, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I live in Jacksonville. I go all the way down to Orlando to cover the Storm. And it's not just because I'm a spring fling guy. I enjoy football, year-round football. I will watch the UFL. I will watch the indoor games, of whatever variety. I will watch Canadian football, and then I'll watch preseason and then go into the college game. I literally watch football all year long. Maybe I think it's probably a good 10 months now that we have football consecutively. And I don't understand why people just go poo-poo on football in general. Okay, so we've had some bad luck with the spring leagues. They've not always been great. We can cancel out that XFL thing, okay? The Vince McMahon era, forget it. I could do it.
Rage, yeah.
Yeah, I could do without the he hate me bit. That was a little too WWE. Actually, no, it was WWF. Let's call that what it was. That was a time. So you can scratch that for what it was. The UFL has been a consistently evolving league. They're making the decisions a little bit at a time. They're not taking off more than they can chew. They're not trying to be a direct competitor with the NFL, so you can get that out of your head. You're going to expect a sense of developmental football, which we need. We need a place for these guys to go. If they can't make NFL rosters, they got to go somewhere to grow. And listen, I like arena football just like the next arena football fan, but that's not it anymore. That had its heyday in the 90s and 2000s, and it's not worth watching anymore. It's just not the same. The IFL, bless them, 18 seasons. Maybe the Orlando Pirates will make a mark on their own here, but I live in shark country. I don't go to a Sharks game. I don't go to Sharks games. Because I was a Predators fan anyway, because who cares about those guys over on the river? But anyhow, it's important that we pour into this, and the Jags fans, to get to the crux of this, the Jags fans can play a serious role in this now because the teal carpet has been rolled out. Jackson DeVille is going to be bungee jumping off of Camping World Stadium in a season or so. They're going to be in Jacksonville for 2026. Okay, that's true. Why not start the party now? Why not get involved in Orlando? I guarantee you there's a lot of season ticket holders in Jacksonville that only go to Orlando for the mouse or maybe go for the whale. They don't come down to see much else. They're like, well, I couldn't point to Church Street Station on a map. Why don't you guys, take a minute. All right, I know gas is $4.29 a gallon. That sucks. But the tickets aren't that bad.
Right.
You're in a smaller venue, Inter and Co is not bad. You're right up on the action, less expensive. Come down to Orlando and watch football, come down and watch, another hometown team and spend your dollars in Orlando. Do a little recon for 2027. Find out where the party scene is. Listen, I met a Jags fan that didn't like to drink.
You do realize that Travis D. Holmes of the Duval Dive wears a T-shirt on that show on occasion that says "This team makes me drink." That's a thing, BP.
Well, yeah. The Kansas City Chiefs make me drink too. But anyway, shut up. And Intuition Ale Works
looks like I said what I said.
I'm
sure there's a certain Monday night where you were drinking for a different reason than Jaguars fans, and I'll leave it at that.
Where's Bobby Bowden when I need him?
I'm not too old to find you, son.
Thank you. Anyhow, here's the thing. Here's something else I found out. Jags fans, you're losing Intuition Ale Works right next to the stadium. They're closing. So you're losing one of the best beer establishments in downtown Jacksonville. They're closing. They're not going to be there for this renovation. So you got to find a new home. So why not come down to O-Town, grab you a game, Saturday night. I know maybe this weekend's a little short notice. It's a little inconvenient, but they've got other Saturday games, get involved with this team because, Orlando, for all the blabbermouthing that people, I won't say hate so much, but it's for the blabbering about, Orlando's not a sports town. Sorry. Put the FCC censor on that one. This is bullshit. Okay. Absolutely. I'll say it right here because have you ever been to a UCF game? Of any sport, if you haven't been to a UCF game, I highly suggest it. UCF Navy was entertaining.
7 UCF sports in the top 25, by the way. And
in the Big 12 conference now. They're not in the American anymore. They upgraded. So, UCF, fantastic. Okay. I'll hold my breath about the Magic. I'll reserve judgment there. But the Jacksonville fans, they have the Icemen up here. The Icemen and the Solar Bears don't like each other. So,
it's a great game to go to. You're not wrong.
It is. It's hilarious. So, I can see that as, we don't want to go down to the Solar Bears. But yeah, hey, you got the Solar Bears. Solar Bears are a great franchise. The ECHL is a lot of fun. I get that because the Icemen also do a great job. But, you can, they got the Icemen here. At one point or another, there was a AA affiliate of the Chicago Cubs was down here at some point. I don't think they're here anymore, but Orlando did have baseball at some point, minor league baseball, a la the Jumbo Shrimp. So, to say Orlando is not a sports town is not really giving it a ton of credit, so it doesn't have the allure of a big professional city. It doesn't have the Detroit or the Indianapolis or the Denver or Dallas feeling to it. But Orlando's got a great capacity to have and host sporting events. And I don't know about you, Kyle, but the fans that I've seen at pro sports events in Orlando have been pretty bought in, and they seem to have a good time. It just kind of makes you wonder, do they have like 15 other friends they could bring with them to go do the same thing and then even have even more fun? Because I didn't see that crowd sitting on their hands, bored out of their mind last week, or unless I was just seeing things for the press box.
The whole thing. Anybody who does that for any of the things you mentioned, whether it's the Magic or UCF or what have you, so many of them make a weekend out of it with the surrounding things there are to do around here. Oh, by the way, BP. So listen, as the lifelong guy who's lived here just outside of Orlando proper, I can tell you for a fact that that's a thing. Okay. The whole reason why the tourism board approved the renovations to the bounce house at UCF that kept the Storm from playing there. No disrespect to Inter and Co. I'm more just selfishly saying it would have been nicer if they were closer to my house, but details. So all of the above to say, yeah, it's not only something where the Storm was a good experience all the way around, as we talked about, but there's enough around there too. So I think the tourism board portion of the show can definitely say that it's not just, about, it's a good well, yeah, it is a good product. I had fun at the Guardians games too, but even though they were losing, the Apollos, that was its own crime. That was a great time. And by the way, those Apollos games is the line through how BP and I met up. That's a separate podcast we'll put behind a paywall if you want to get a Patreon. But
yes,
all of that to say, it's a good experience. Make sure you lean into that. BP is 100% real. But BP, I want to go over more to the football side. I want to do an X Factor portion here. We didn't plan for this part. I'm pulling one out here because I'm genuinely we've talked a lot about general stuff. I'm not 100% dialed in on your football philosophy. Like, listen, when I'm on the Duval Dive, I already know what Travis D. Holmes is going to say, and it's probably going to have to do with the defensive secondary because, he used to be a corner. What has to happen not only to get a dub against the Kings here at Inter & Co. for the Storm, but for you to decree that they have improved from week one?
Well, first thing they got to do is establish the line of scrimmage. Yeah. It starts right there. There were already some gaping holes in line play. It started out really well with a run, again, early momentum shift, sudden change. So that catches everybody off guard. But once Columbus got settled down, the line was having some issues. Plummer was starting to have to run a little bit more around than he was used to in the first couple of series. So you got to start it at the point of attack, set your beef up front and just knock him over. You got to punch a guy in the mouth. Basically, you got to want it right at the point of attack. And from there, establish the run game. You got to have some balance right now. Like I said, Jayshon Corbin, he's good. He's a consistent runner. Dotson's also a consistent runner. So you've got the opportunity to run between the tackles and grind out a really, gritty win and set up your offensive balance. Because like we've seen, you could see the stats across the board. Not a whole lot of balance in any offense across the league. So it's a good opportunity right now to establish your ground game and set up pass, run to set up pass. In many of these offenses that are spread oriented, it's usually the other way around. They're going to pass to set up run, or the run is the change up. It wouldn't hurt to get between the tackles. I mean, for God's sake, you've got 3 tight ends on the roster that are dressed now, and they're blockers. I mean, Coach Beck said this too. He was concerned about having 3 tight ends. So, he's got them out there and they play their butts off and they threw some blocks and they absolutely were not afraid to smack a guy. So take advantage of that. Load up in some jumbo sets every once in a while. The tush push is illegal in this league, so you can't be shoving guys like that. But, hit him in the mouth and establish your dominance and establish the ground game. And then let Plummer cook over the middle with those crossing patterns. Get your skill guys in space because they will yakety yak, take it all the way to the end zone. Again, we've got the talent on the edges to be able to do that. That's the biggest thing on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, you need to keep doing what you're doing. Get in their faces, dial up some pressure, not all the time, but let them know that you got some spice. Let them know that you're gonna come after them and not just relax. Like we said, Jason Bean is going to be able to roll out of the pocket. He can move. He's going to be a target to pay attention to. He's that third runner in the backfield that you have to pay attention to. So you're going to have to bring some heat, get him uncomfortable. It was obvious in the Birmingham game that when he was unsettled, he made some careless plays. Force him into position where he's got to make mistakes and then let your defense capitalize on it. Plummer threw 2 interceptions. Call him back if you will on the penalties, but Plummer still threw 2 interceptions. You need to do that on the flip side and create the turnovers and get Bean on his heels at that point, because once he gets deeper into his head, it's going to take him a little while to crawl out of it. And that point, you're on the accelerator scoring more than they're doing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I asked for an X factor. You gave me a full breakdown. I ain't going to front on that. But for me, there's one stat I'm looking at, and I really didn't get not back into position until it was the Becht effect working on me when you asked him that question earlier this week, BP. The Storm, I believe, will only secure the win if the number of trips made to the red zone drops. They can't have the opponent in the red zone 5 times, I believe, and win again reliably. They may still do it. Who knows? Maybe Jack Plummer makes all the necessary adjustments, gains enough chemistry and practice this week and all that to hit some of the near misses in the upcoming game. And listen, Isaiah Buggs and company up front may crawl around and force Bean to make mistakes and have all sorts of tackles and stuff. I get it, but for me, I'd like to see that defense get a turnover, not just on special teams, right? And make that difference. And I think the point you made about forcing Bean into mistakes will, in fact, make that happen.
Yeah, and I apologize. My X was just larger this time around. There's lots of X's that they had to get into because it's week 2 now. Now you got to start bringing it together.
Apologize for good analysis, BP. What are we doing? Come on, man.
And I just apologize for not following directions. But then again, but you're right about that. That one thing that you got to do. And honestly, it's the red zone. I would agree with you wholeheartedly. 1 for 5 is a great stat, but it's the 5 part that you really want to look out for. And especially now, since, you can let them get across the 50 because they can't punt.
That's so real. Yeah.
That is spellbinding to me. What a sucker punch to your special teams coach going, all right, well, once we get to the 49, we're screwed. You can't punt. Now you could probably line up for a field goal and miss it horribly on purpose, and it would work like a punt. So, and that's the old arena throwback. Yeah. But, honestly speaking, you can get now, you really don't want to even get them across the 50 though. You want to be in a position where you're on the minus territory and they're lining up their punter at this point. You want to stop them at the 45-yard line. So yeah, stay out of the red zone more than anything else as many times. And Coach Becht did say that too. The less they're inside the 20, the better, because the defense is going to be able to jump back and capitalize. But yeah, I wouldn't even let them cross the 50. I would force their punter to do some work and stay on that side of the field and let your return game set you up from there. Also, if you want to add another X factor onto this, especially special teams, kick coverage. Yeah. The dynamic kickoff, in my opinion, is better executed in the UFL than it is in the NFL. I don't know. Well, partially because NFL kickers still kick it out of the end zone, even from where they are. So it's almost like they don't want to run the kick the way they want to go back to the old school. Whatever, guys. The dynamic kickoff has its moments, and the UFL executes it possibly the best. And the Storm had a couple of opportunities to run some kicks back, but the coverage that they ran into from Columbus was exquisite. So I think you got to stay in your lanes. You got to block a little bit better on special teams and open up some opportunities because, again, you've got some skill players back there. They get their hands on the ball and they hit the accelerator and they're gone.
And that's the thing about week 1. I don't know how much of that was the Storm struggling versus the Aviators being good, but that's a good call out right there.
Yeah, no, their coverage was actually better than the Storm's blocking scheme was, which is fine. You can make adjustments to that week over week, but you can't do that now because now you've got film. Now you've got something to go on. So, if you improve that blocking a little bit, you put Roland or you put Dotson, back there, or even Jayshawn Corbin back there, running kickoffs back, you're going to have some opportunities to make some huge special teams plays. Even if you don't score, you're going to get excellent field position, get those short fields. We've already seen what Orlando can do on the short field. So why not get that set up? But to Columbus's credit, they did a really good job of covering the kicks because I saw a couple of those, you get that rumble where you're like, oh, here he goes. He's going to go, oh, no, they tackled him at the 30-yard line. It was one of those that the blocking was there just enough, but then Columbus shimmied around it and stayed disciplined and got around it and made some great open field tackles. So.
No shock that a group coached by Ted Ginn Jr., who was a great special teams returner in his own right in the NFL, is a group that understands special teams beyond a reasonable doubt. So, with that being said, BP and I have a very interesting Saturday night to look forward to. But in the meantime, Stormtroopers, BP, tell the world where you could be found.
Oh, you can find me. It's on your screen right there at bp.onair. That's the home of all of my wild and crazy stuff. Of course, I'm sharing things from our Instagram page at Storm Surge ORL. And you can find us there. We are the Storm Surge podcast. There are lots of other things named Storm Surge, like the Hype Team, also very fun. But look for us at Storm Surge ORL on the Instagrams. Send us a DM, comment. I'll be the one that answers it primarily, as I help with the Instagram side of things. But you can also hit me up again at BP On Air, or you can visit my website, www.bponair.com. That's the home of the shores of the St. John's. Kyle, where are they finding you these days?
Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter at the SOTG. And as the student of the game on Facebook, Storm Surge is really the name of the Hype Team. I'm embarrassed to say I did not know that. So with all that being said as well,
that's okay.
Storm Surge ORL is also the Twitter handle and our YouTube at there too. So if you go to YouTube / Storm Surge ORL, you will find us as well, where hopefully you're doing the like, the subscribe, and notifications and all the things. Also, you can find us on your podcast feed on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And there was another one. Shouts to Tyler Klink, by the way, where I am supposed to extend to here. I forget the name of it, but it used to be what Google Podcast was. We're going to put the RSS feed out there as well as soon as I figure out how to do that. And then, of course, make sure you do all the things there. We can get you more coverage. And again, continue to leg out for everything we're doing. And if there's something you want to hear about or ask about, I primarily answer the comments on the YouTube channel side. So make sure you look for all of that. So for the great BP, this is Kyle Nash, student of the game. Until next time, everyone, class dismissed.
Fight back.